For everyone here, in terms of following the news, it seems that President Obama will be making a very important announcement within the next several days as to whether to initiate a U.S. bombing of Iraq. And if you've been following the news, I want to describe some of these developments, but I want to say first, last, and as a theme running through this, that we stand against any form of U.S. intervention, whether it's bombing, or it's sanctions, or it's drones, or it's troops, or it's funding of any organization in Iraq, in Syria, or against Iran, or continuing in Afghanistan. And we also reject any lie that the media is raising to justify any form of U.S. intervention. The U.S. policy in Iraq and Syria has been to foment the greatest and most brutal forms of sectarian division based on religion and ethnicity. In Iraq, during the years of U.S. occupation, the most reactionary groups were financed, and only they could run for office. Any other forces were targeted with assassination, banned from participating, faced imprisonment, torture, disappearances. Every ID card was marked by religion. Whole neighborhoods, parts of whole cities were forcibly relocated based on religion. Walls placed everywhere. Who could travel, who couldn't travel, who could go to school, who couldn't go to school. The heading of ministries. Only the collaborators, those appointed by the U.S., could run for office, took U.S. authorization, could receive funding or equipment, or head any area of government. Now, President Maliki is a U.S. collaborator. That's absolutely true. Put in place by the U.S. At the same time, in a completely weak position, and has tried to make his own deals with Iran, with Syria. As Deirdre just explained, President Karzai in Afghanistan is doing, much to the fury and frustration of the U.S. The Iraqi parliament, where who could run, was really a U.S. decision. They were collaborators, and yet the pressure from below was so intense that even that body refused to sign the Status of Forces Agreement, allowing permanent U.S. bases in Iraq. That was a strategy from the beginning. U.S. 14 permanent bases and so on. So there are many things in play that it's clear that the U.S. cannot control, and we don't want to represent anything that's happening as being completely a strategy from start to finish by the U.S. But we want to take note in evaluating what's going on and everything that, as the media reports it, which we shouldn't accept a line of it as being true, that the only solution of U.S. imperialism to their crises is to create greater and greater division and greater destruction. And we need to be thinking very consciously how to prepare emergency response actions that are focused on U.S. out. And every excuse for the U.S. to go in again or stay in, because really in many ways they have continued in Iraq through the funding of different groups. Now, there were news reports today saying that if a decision is taken, it could be carried out in less than 24 hours. Because the U.S. has the bases in the region, they have the aircraft carriers, they have the jets, they have the drones, they have the troops. For any manner and it could begin immediately on decision. So it's not like there's a lot of time on this at all. One thing that the media has been saying is that they always want to go back. If they lose any agreement, they want the right to have U.S. bases in Iraq. Will that be the deal to save the Maliki government? We don't know. And we don't know a lot of what's being reported, just to say that. I'm skimming over some of the notes here because there's just so much being said that we don't know. We know that President Obama has said that there are some short-term, immediate things that need to be done militarily in the days ahead. We don't know what that means. We do know that there are also a whole number of petitions now online. All different anti-war organizations are, making also anti-war demands. Some of them are simply saying no bombing. They don't mention all the other forms of U.S. intervention that are going on every single minute. Now, what we do know is that the Iraqi army absolutely collapsed, simply melted away, as they say, at Mosul, and refused to put up any kind of defense against the forces arrayed against them. Now, this policy and it's a conscious policy of inflaming sectarian hatred as a means of control during the years of Iraqi occupation, and it especially the Sunni Iraqi population was especially targeted, and the most sectarian Shia groups were promoted. Inflaming sectarian division has also been a cornerstone of U.S. policy in Syria, and the arming, very consciously, of the most reactionary groups, and funding them very, very well, through Saudi Arabia, through Turkey, through the Gulf states. And the division of the whole region into destabilized, chaotic, impoverished, different groupings, at this point seems to be the strategy, U.S. policy, because they've tried many other forms of direct occupation. It was an absolute failure. And as I said, even the forces they thought were collaborators, and we see this also in Afghanistan, there's no one soldier, military commander or rank and file who they can trust at any one moment. And they live with that every minute. They have, it seems, lost control of Mosul and Tikrit, and also in the Kurdish region, which is an area dominated by the U.S., the government there has been able to seize control of Kirkuk. So there's an enormous upheaval going on. Now, the group, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, this is an extreme, both reactionary but religious grouping based among the Sunnis that has been very consciously funded by Saudi Arabia, with conscious understanding and agreement from the U.S., maybe not directly coordinated, but certainly NATO has played a role in this, Turkey has played a role in this, and the role is to ignite this region-wide sectarian war throughout the Middle East. And very often Turkish artillery and air cover is used, while Saudi equipment, while, as I say, U.S. coordination is used. Now, just to also say something about the Ba'ath Party in both Iraq and in Syria. And today, and I raise this, a very important election took place last Tuesday in Syria. Really an enormous accomplishment by the Syrian people as a whole, where President Bashar Assad was elected. We were part of the observer delegation there. As we said, there's a meeting on Wednesday for them to report back here in New York. There'll be meetings around the country. Now, who is the Ba'ath Party, and why was there such a determination to destroy both Iraq and Syria? It's a radical bourgeois party. They have big differences with each other. It's not a socialist party. But it stood for sovereignty and came out of the anti-imperialist revolutionary upsurge of the Arab masses of the 1950s and 60s. And it stood in both Iraq and in Syria for a secular state, for the rights of women. It stood for the natural resources and major industries being nationalized, and that being spent, the funds from that being spent on developing infrastructure and free education and free health care. It's not anti-capitalist. National capitalist remained in both Iraq and in Syria. But it did seek independence from imperialism. Now, in both Iraq and in Syria, they made deals with imperialism in an effort to survive and against each other. But against both, U.S. imperialism has used extreme terror and destruction and sanctions and starvation and encirclement, and has built up very consciously the most reactionary religious and tribal and old structure, and also fanatical new forces. Okay, raise those points. Now, just to also say that we can only rely on the bourgeois media, and there are many different takes on this as to what is happening. Is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria the only force on the ground, as the media says, wholly responsible for this? Others say that there's an uprising of the Sunni population against a corrupt government and in response to extreme repression, and that the two have combined forces. There are other interpretations that the uprising is what is predominant. And we don't know. But we do know that U.S. bombs will only move things further beyond control. They want more concessions. They want bases. They want the complete destruction of Syria. Former Ambassador Ford, in the New York Times op-ed piece just 2 days ago, gave a whole justification for U.S. policy. He had been, previous to being ambassador to Syria, in Iraq. Really, his efforts were to coordinate, to head the death squads. He was the right hand of Negroponte until he was moved to coordinate in Syria. He didn't succeed very well, but what is his solution to a policy that has completely collapsed, as the Syrian government has been able to rally the population behind it? And the population sees what happened in Libya and what happened in Iraq just next door. And regardless of the differences they have and may have had, and that includes the Syrian Communist Party and other forces with Assad in the past, they're not for a total takeover and total dismemberment. And so all different forces came together politically in Syria in the elections. And what was Ambassador Ford's solution? He said, well, we have to vastly increase the amount of arms to the, quote, moderate opposition in order to fight terrorism. And that is the excuse that Obama may use for going back into Iraq, that this is all fighting terrorism. That was the excuse used 9/11 and for the years of war on Afghanistan. It's a very amorphous and loose term, terrorism. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, it's like it just sprung from the ground. And it is important for us to know this was a group funded by the Saudis and the Gulf states, but with real collusion and coordination by US, NATO, and Turkey. And in all of our material and in our statements, because there is so much speculation, we, I think, want to keep the general, sometimes to have a general overview is the most important thing in a crisis. And that is, first, foremost, to blame US imperialism for creating this crisis and the divisions and inflaming it and pouring gasoline on it. This was true for Clinton and Bush, who really created this, and the Obama administration that's continued it. The national security apparatus, whether it's using surveillance or funding or mercenaries, all of this is a sign that the U.S. position is weakening, that increasingly there aren't political solutions they're even capable of. Their only recourse again and again is to military solutions, which resolve nothing and only inflame greater rage among the population. They can't control the puppets and the proxy forces that they create, establish, put in position. And there's a great deal that is beyond their control. But for a workers' movement right here, just sometimes clearly stating and being ready to mobilize is the way that we focus and orient ourselves. Thank you.